Hi, in this next video we're going to look at some of the more advanced features of Microsoft SQL Server Profiler. In the first video we explained how to go ahead and configure or set up a SQL Server Profiler trace. In this video we are actually going to look at some of the more advanced concepts such as creating a trace template, understanding some of the more common trace templates, using one of the trace templates. As you can see here, what we have is we've just got the trace template or the trace profiler window open, and let's go ahead and create a profiler trace like before. So I've got trace 1, which is a profiler trace that I'm creating. Now, as explained previously, you got a couple of templates here such as duration, locks, and tuning, which are some of the more common ones that I use frequently. Other than that, you got sp count and you got group, logs, replay, etc. And essentially what these do is that it's very straightforward from the name itself. So sp count actually counts the number of times the procedure was executed, and then you got duration, which will tell you if there are any long running queries on the server. And again, you can go ahead and configure this for any amount of duration so that you can exclude certain queries that you think may not fit the criteria of being a long running query. Again, you got tsql group, which is basically grouping the data based on connections, and then you got logs, which will explain how or what kind of logs the SQL Server is acquiring and releasing as part of executing a query. tsql replay is something similar to what we would have in terms of distributed replay controller in SQL 2012, except for that here in profiler we can do it only for one instance or one particular server. Now, replay is basically used to identify the sequence or the order in which events happen on the SQL Server database engine. It's often useful when you're trying to investigate very specific scenarios. Also, we have tsql SPs, and then last but not least, we have tuning, which is essentially just capturing information that you can pass to Database Tuning Advisor to do some amount of indexing and performance tuning later on. So the first thing that we want to do at this point is we want to go ahead and create a trace file. So I'm creating a trace file on my desktop called trace1.trc. trc is the extension for a trace file. Now what this essentially does is that it logs or captures the information and records it into a trace file so that I can replay it or basically just rerun the trace file at a later point in time. It's especially useful when you're trying to capture events over a long period of time and you want to monitor or review that data at your convenience later on. So again, when you set a file here, when you set up a trace file here, you'll see that some of the options become enabled. For example, you've got the maximum size, and by default it's 5 MB. The idea here is that this one trace file is going to be 5 megabytes in size, after which it does have the option to go ahead and roll over, which means that it'll go ahead and create additional files of 5 MB. If you uncheck this, it basically means that the trace will stop as soon as this particular file reaches 5 MB in size. It's a good idea to go ahead and enable file rollover along with the stop time so that you can control the fact that the trace does not run indefinitely and consume too much space. Also, you can go ahead and disable this if you're looking for a very specific event and you have complete control over what is being captured. So it's generally a good idea to go ahead and capture this data in a trace file so that you can move it around rather than go ahead and store it in a table, because again, a table is essentially just capturing the information inside a database, and when you're capturing a large amount of data and inserting it into the table, log file size, etc. needs to be accounted for. So now that we've gone ahead and configured a trace file, so I'm just going to leave it at the 5 MB default, and I'm not going to enable file rollover. This date is fine because I know I'm going to stop this trace anyway before it reaches this time, so it's okay. And let's go ahead and look at some of the templates and the events that are being captured in these. So the first thing that you'll notice is that sp counts, as you can see here, is just got the count of times, basically one row for every time the store procedure is executed. So this is useful when you're trying to identify frequently run store procedures on the database. Not really something that most DBAs would use frequently. We've already explored the standard, which is just giving you a broad summary about what every query is doing on a server. tsql duration, or tsql is basically just the ad hoc requests that are going on. So you can see that this is again very similar to what you would have in terms of standard, except for it doesn't really capture a lot of the other information like NT login, CPU read, write, etc. Duration is something that's actually quite useful because you can go ahead and configure this to monitor store procedures as well as ad hoc SQL, and in addition create a column filter for durations greater than or equal to say 1000 milliseconds, which means it'll capture information for every query that takes more than a second to run. This is useful when you're trying to identify blocking, locking, and performance issues, and you just want to identify the store procedures or ad hoc SQL that's contributing to it. In addition, you got other ones like T-SQL Group, which is basically just grouping the data based on these application name, NT user, etc., so that it's easier for you to analyze based on the user information. The next thing you want to look at is T-SQL logs, and as you can see here, when you use T-SQL logs, you got the block process report, and you also got the lock chain, basically deadlock chain. So this is useful when you're trying to monitor deadlock events that are happening on the server. And in addition, it's going to go ahead and show you information about what kind of locks were acquired as part of the store procedure executing and ad hoc SQL executing. So a lot of information here, especially type, which is useful. But for the most part, it looks very similar to what you'd see in a standard profile. In addition to this, we've got replay, which is again very similar. So you got a lot of things that do happen on the server, so it's capturing most of that information, such as cursor events, audit and security, session information, store procedures, and T-SQL, which is pretty much what you want to capture in terms of replay. Other than that, the last one that you're looking at, or basically the second last one you're looking at, is T-SQL SPs. And for the most part, these templates look pretty much the same as what you've been seeing already in some of the standard, and the only real thing that changes is some of the events or some of the columns here. Tuning is something that's a bit special because you go ahead and use tuning when you want to try and then pass this trace file information to DTA. DTA is the database tuning advisor, and the idea is that it'll go ahead and capture the trace information here, review it, and then suggest things that you can do to optimize SQL Server execution. So let's go ahead and just select tuning at the moment and then run the trace. At this point, the trace is running, but there's really not much going on. So let me go ahead and execute a store procedure or a SQL query to go ahead and execute or fetch some data. And as you can see, it's got some information that's been captured. I'm going to stop this now, and I'm going to save the trace data as it's already saved, so I don't need to save it again, but this is the one that I'm going to use, so I'm just overriding it. So at this point, if I go ahead and just stop the trace and then try to reload it, I'll get the same information that was captured as part of the store procedure, the query execution. A good thing about Profiler is that I can then go ahead and select export and then choose extract SQL Server events and then execute, save it as a T-SQL file. So in this case, if you open up the T-SQL file, which I'll just do in a minute. Just a second. So you can see that you're actually getting a list of all the T-SQL that's been executed on the server at this point of time. So this is how you want to go ahead and use some of the more common profile templates available inside Profiler, and how you can export some of the results in order to evaluate it in detail. My name is Jayanth, and thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. We'll continue it in the next session on how to set up a server-side trace and also evaluate some of these values and pass it on to DTA. Thank you for watching.